Welcome everybody to the Week 3 edition of the Commissioner's Address for Drunken Fumble. It was another week of football with a ton of defense going on. It's been a really low-scoring year so far in the NFL. Lots of injuries. Let's dive right into it. First matchup of the week, we got greatest of all time taking on the Capper Goats. Greatest of all time losing again, even with a half-decent score. Capper Goats taking it away 150 to 132. Brady showed up for me, which was good, but it was against the Saints, so I don't know if that really shows anything other than the fact that the Saints do suck against everybody. Ty Montgomery looks like a every week starter. He looks like a tight end one this year in PPR leagues. He was good. He had 29 points. Brady had 30. Russell Wilson had a slightly better game with 15, but my kicker still beat him. So that said, I did lose. Travis Kelce had another big week. He had 8 catches and a touchdown and a little more than 100 yards. Michael Crabtree, that guy can go off on any given week. He had 6 catches for 80 yards and 3 touchdowns, and that was the nail in the coffin and pretty much won the week for Capper Goats. I don't have a lot of points on my bench, frankly. It's kind of scary. Derrick Henry, I'm hoping, is actually the feature back now in Tennessee. We'll see. I don't know what the injury looks like to DeMarco Murray, and even if he's not injured, they might just run with the hot hand. Anyway, he ended up with 15.2 points on my bench. Chris Carson sitting on Capper Goat's bench. He might be starting him next week. He looks like kind of the front guy in Seattle. That'll be interesting to see how that pans out. Eddie Lacy is just no longer fantasy relevant. I was reading today in any kind of fantasy draft and a fantasy league, he can be dropped. So he kind of disappeared, which is too bad because he was fun to watch in his prime. Anyway, Capper Goats taking it away, moving up to 1-1, good enough for 6th spot, and greatest of all time at 0-2, good enough for 10th, which is not going to cut it, but that's the way it goes. Second matchup, which I would have beat both of you fuckers this week. Broken Johnson's take away the win over 4th and Lynch's 121 to 99. Broken Johnson's without David Johnson moving to 2-0. Good enough for the 3rd spot. Casey at 1-1. Good enough for 5th. There was just a ton of consistency on Eric's team. Nobody had more than 20 points. But everybody was pretty good, aside from Bilal Powell and Jimmy Graham, who combined for 2.4. It wasn't really a high-scoring affair from anybody. Keenan Allen had 9 catches for 100 yards, so good PPR day. No touchdowns, so that's kind of tough. Bilal Powell had 13 rush yards. Mark Ingram got exactly what he was projected for, 11.6 points. That doesn't happen very often. I still think, is the best option in New Orleans. They don't have the play style for Adrian Peterson. Minnesota designed a playbook for Adrian Peterson so that he could stand 9 fucking yards back and come in at 95 miles an hour. You don't do that when you have Drew Brees. And he's going to keep throwing the ball. So Alvin Kamara might get some more touches there. Ingram still seems like the feature back there. Mariota did actually come away with the win, 37-16, but he didn't have to do a whole bunch. He ended up with 14 points. So looking at the bench here, looks like Casey would have won if he would have started. No, he wouldn't have won, but he would have been darn close if he would have started the Kansas City defense over the LA defense. Kansas City went up against Philly, who has looked pretty good, but not as good as Kansas City, because right now nobody looks as good as Kansas City. But Rob, calm your tits. They are slowing down, and they will continue to do so. Trevor Siemian. So he's a top 5 fucking quarterback after 2 weeks. So that's kind of neat. Good thing he was on your bench, Eric. So, like I said, Eric coming away with the win there. Next matchup, Bassett's Brawlers coming away with a tight win here, 132-126 over Rusty Pole. Both of these players will move to 1-1, good enough for 7th and 8th spot. Melvin Gordon had a pretty good day. He had 7 and a rushing touchdown. So that's a pretty good fantasy day. He's never been known for catching the ball, so that's kind of nice to see him opening up a little bit. It sucks for the Chargers that lost Miami 19-17. The Chargers are a good team. Phillip Rivers is a good quarterback. They just can't put fucking games together. I don't understand it. It's also tough because they're in a division with the Broncos and with Kansas City and with Oakland, so they're pretty much fucked from the get-go. Who else we got going on here? Atlanta defense against Green Bay. That was a bold start. They did end up with 19 points with a defensive touchdown, 3 sacks, and 3 tackles for a loss. Carson Palmer had a better week this week than he did last week with 16.8 points. And Emmanuel Sanders was good. Really good, actually. He was really clutch for Denver. And frankly, I think it's Simeon that's kind of boosting him a little bit. But Emmanuel Sanders came away with 24 points. What do we got going on the bench here? Matt Bryant, who Spencer sat, had 91 yards on 3 catches and a touchdown. So a better standard scoring game than PPR because he didn't get a ton of catches, but good enough for 18 points. He's a good streamer. I mean, you could put him in any given week and he could explode, or he could get 2 catches for 6 yards. So, which might have been what he did last week. Let's see here. You know what? Fuck that, because my internet sucks out in the garage. But he didn't do much last week. He did a little bit more this week, so he's kind of a plug-and-play kind of guy. Fear Boners beating average JoJo's. 141 to 122 is a much better showing by average JoJo's, and if he continues to improve on a weekly basis like this, he'll be getting 1,000 points a week by the end of the year, because he got about 60 more points this week than he did last week, but wasn't enough to beat the Fear Boners. So Fear Boners moves to 2-0, good enough for second spot, and average JoJo's to 0-2. Good enough for 12th. I have to go up against Fear Boners this week, and I am not looking forward to it. On Fear Boners' side, Jarvis Landry. He had 13 catches. Like, it doesn't matter how many yards you get. When you get 13 catches, you're going to get some PPR points. He ended up with 20 points. He had negative rush yards on the night. He had 78 reception yards, but he had 13 catches. That's crazy. Cutler likes him. Cutler likes throwing it out there. Carlos Hyde with 17.3 points from San Fran. And the Baltimore defense with 24 points on the winning side as well. The Baltimore team, they haven't had to do a whole bunch on offense to win. They've really just been game managers. And say what you want about Flacco, the guy can throw the ball. He's a startable quarterback. He's a good team quarterback. Had a little camera issue there. I'm hoping that I can put these 2 videos together, and I know it's going to be an abrupt transition, but anyway, I was talking about Flacco, and he's a good NFL quarterback. He might not be the greatest fantasy quarterback in the world, but he kind of does what he needs to do. So finishing up this matchup here, J.J. Nelson sitting on the bench for JoJo's. That's going to be huge going forward because he has been a monster in Arizona with David Johnson out and them double covering Larry Fitzgerald all over the field. It opens it up for J.J. Nelson. And there was another player I was trying to pick up this week, but so many of you fuckers picked him up. Richard something. I'll see if I can find him here, but it looks like he's getting a lot of targets in Arizona as well. Arizona's still looking to make a push. They're still a good team. They're well coached. They're well rounded. Even without David Johnson and the fuck show of the backfield that they got going on right now, they still want to be a competitive team. So they're going to keep taking the risks. They're going to keep taking the ball downfield, and they are going to come to play. On the bench of Fear Boner's side was Duke Johnson Jr. He had 11 points on the day. He was projected for 11.02, so pretty fucking close. But if you guys haven't seen his catch yet from this week, oh, you guys got to pull it up. He ran probably about 20 yards, and he just straight up OBJ'd it. It wasn't a touchdown, but man, it was a good catch. Really cool to watch. Jumping into next matchup, Flabby Gooch Going up against Vallette's Vengeance. Flabby Gooch with a huge score this week of 165, enough to take out Vallette's Vengeance at 124. Carson Wentz, 25 points. Devontae Freeman, 24. Gronkowski, 23. Derek Carr, 21. And it goes on and on and on. Started the Denver defense against Dallas. Not that you can't start them against anyone, but they did come away with 19 points. Over on Jesse's side, Drew Brees did have 22 points against New England, which is not great. I think Drew Brees is really going to take off when my wide receiver comes back from injury, Willie Snead, and I'm hoping that he does so. New England doesn't have a great defense this year, and he ended up with 22 points. I mean, he had 350 yards and 2 touchdowns, so it's nothing to scoff at, but it's Drew Brees. Antonio Brown had a very regular day against Minnesota, which was good, except for the fact that Minnesota lost 26-9. Not a whole bunch of fun with Bradford gone. Antonio Brown ended up with 5 catches for 62 yards. Not a whole bunch else going on Jesse's side here. Looking at the bench, Kobe Fleener again, 12 points. Again, not huge, but like I said last week, Breeze seems to like him. He's going to keep going to him. So Marquise Lee sitting on the bench. On AJ's side here, 14 points, which is actually pretty good for a Jacksonville wide receiver. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there between Hearns and Marquise Lee, and they keep pulling people from their practice squad. But when it comes down to it, Bortles just straight up sucks. Okay. Getting into the last matchup of the week, Jack and Goff going up against the waiver wire, and apparently when everybody goes against Rob so far this season, you're just not allowed to put up more than about 77 points. And that's exactly what happened here. Jack and Goff taking the win. Alex Smith had a much more Alex Smith night at 16 points. Tyreek Hill had a slow night at just shy of 9. Mike Evans was good. He had 7 catches for 93 and a touchdown. Todd Gurley looks like Todd Gurley, so I'm sure Rob is happy about that because he is a Rams fan. Kareem Hunt was good again. You know, he had 2 touchdowns, so that kind of made his point total a little bit higher than than what his yardage would actually dictate. Greg Olsen, that's a big loss. He only had 1 catch for 10 yards, but he is on the IR. He broke a bone in his foot. They expect him to be back later this year. Eli Manning was terrible on Nick's side, which sucked for me, again, because I have OBJ, and he didn't do shit. So that was fun. Going on the bench here, CJ Anderson had a huge night. He had 30 points sitting on Rob's bench, and Jason Witten also had a big night. So Jason Witten can slide right in there nicely and take care of the injured Olsen spot. Corey Coleman is also on the IR, so I do see that what I'm looking at right now, maybe you dropped him already, Rob, but he is on IR. I can't remember what happened to him, his hand or something stupid, I don't know. Bitching and moaning about something or other. Okay, so we are looking at the points here, and we made Rob the Superman of the week last week, and he did have another good week, but this week's Superman of the week is none other than the Fear Boners. Fear Boners is in second spot right now with 296 points, which is second overall only to Rob, who has 312. Flabby Gooch, who's in fourth right now, has 293 spots. And then you know who has the next most points? This guy. I have 276 points, and I'm in 10th. Which sucks super balls, and who has next points behind me would be Jesse at Vallette's Vengeance, and he's also 0-2, good enough for 11th spot. I have 311 points against through 2 weeks, Rob has 145. 145. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 teams that are averaging more points than that a week. And that's through 2 weeks. So good for you, Rob. But yeah, Fear Boners gets the win this week for the Superman. That brings us right into... You a bitch. The bitch of the week goes to none other than the waiver wire. 76 points. Carolina was your highest scoring player with 19. And then it was Eli with 12. And then McCoy with 10. And it just goes downhill from there. You didn't have much else going on your bench. So there's not a whole bunch you could have done there. The fact is you just suck. And that sucks. So let's take a look. I have let's see what I can do here. I hope you guys can see this. Maybe not, but I'll do it briefly here. So this is Shane's Power Rankings of the week. He sent me this over this morning. Number 1 spot, we do have Jack and Goff with a 2-0 record, followed by the Fear Boners, Flabby Gooch, Bassett's Brawlers, Capper Goats, Fourth and Lynches, Broken Johnsons, despite being 2-0, did slide down to 7th spot. Actually, that might be where he was last week because it doesn't look like he's moved. I'm still in 8th spot. And then we have Vallette's Vengeance, Rusty Pole, Waiver Wire, and Average JoJo's wrapping it up at the end there. Looking at our final standings after week 2, we've got Jack and Goff, Fear Boners, and Broken Johnsons at 2-0. Flabby Gooch, Fourth and Lynches, Capper Goats, Bassett's Brawlers, Rusty Pole, Waiver Wire at 1-1. And then greatest of all time, Vallette's Vengeance, Average JoJo's at 0-2, wrapping it up. If you are 0-2 right now, like I am, you better hope you're not going up against Fear Boners in week 3 like I am, because we need a win. If you get 7 wins, if you go 7-6, you might make the playoffs. If you go 8-5, you have a pretty good chance of making the playoffs. But we're down to 11 weeks, which means you have to go 8-3 to finish off the year just to have a chance. So you better be looking for a win in week 3. It's a big week coming up, and I am a little bit nervous. I don't like being 0-2, but I don't like being 0-3 even more. So that'll wrap up the Week 3 edition of the Commissioner's Address. Good luck, everybody. Let's watch some football, and let's kick some ass. Commish out.